You're working on a project, you've been tasked to do A, B, and C, but now it's a few months down the road and you're doing D, E, and F and not getting paid extra for it. Scope creep sucks. It really does. We've been stuck with it. You've been stuck with it. Everybody's been stuck with it. Intentionally or not, scope creep really sucks. Though there is a proper way to handle it. And honestly, the easiest way to handle it is don't allow it, and through your contract, write out what should happen if there is scope creep. If anything else, just do that. Prevent it in your scope, in your documents, and your proposals and your contracts. Handle it all there, and then don't worry about it once the project starts. That's the easiest way to handle it. If you don't have to watch anything else, just stop there. All done. Really, just do that. Prevent it in your contract. And in today's Morning for Visionaries, we're going to be talking about what to do in that contract about it, how to handle it if it's not in your contract, and what you can kind of sort of do with I'm not going to say employees, but with your clients, and how you can handle clients with employees to make sure that all these things work together when there is scope creep. So, getting started, first and foremost, I said it in the beginning, prevent it in your contract when possible. Meaning, write it in your contract. Don't prevent it being in your contract. Write it in your contract as in provisions for what should happen should there be scope creep. Are you going to charge hourly rate? Are you going to say, fine, we can do this, but we're going to do another project? Are you going to do that? Are you going to say, well, we can stretch it just a little bit? Is there some wiggle room, or is there zero wiggle room? What should happen if there is scope creep? What should happen? Who's going to handle it? How is it going to be handled? What priority is it going to be given? For example, if you're developing a website and all the servers crash and burn and data is lost, and so the scope creep is rebuild the site on a brand new server of the existing application. How are you going to handle these things? Do you have to cover everything? No, but at least cover the bare minimum of, we've been hired to do A, B, and C, but now you're asking us to do these additional things. It's going to cost you extra at an hourly rate to do these things because it's not part of the project you were hired us to do for. But if that's not in your contract, what are you going to do, right? Well, before we get there, the important things is have in your contract, again, what to do about scope creep to prevent it from happening in your contract, because you can say, we're going to do exactly this thing, nothing more. Should you want something more, we can sit down and talk again. There's no hourly rate provision, there's nothing. Stop there. You can write all these tasks you want, all these extra additional features you want, all this initial stuff you want us to do, whatever it might be. We'll write it down. We can sit down next Friday, whatever, and discuss them as a new project. Write it out what's going to happen when somebody says, I want this extra work. Now, before we get into how to handle, should you not have this in your contract, and what to say to people, regardless of if it's in your contract or not, scope creep is probably going to happen. And should you allow it? Honestly, if you have a good relationship with somebody and they are good people, good business people, good entrepreneurs that you're working with, I'd say probably allow a little bit. Why not? Help them when you reasonably can. And most people are very reasonable about this thing. They might not even realize that it's scope creep. You might say, for example, we're going to create a small website for you with 3 pages. And they say, well, okay, fine. So we're going to be a home page, the contact page, and the about page. Can you create a quick team page for us? Well, okay, I guess why not? It's not the end of the world to create a quick little page for you, which is more or less a copy of the about page. And it's a subpage. It's going to have a photo and a title. Why not? It's not the end of the world. It's okay. So, do you allow scope creep? I'd say sometimes it's okay. It depends on what you're being asked to do. It might be a lot. If it's a lot, honestly, then no, that's a big no-no. Now, so let's get into the, if it's not in your contract, you've kind of screwed yourself over there already. You really should have these things in your contract to say what's going to happen. But if you don't worry. You've written out more or less what you're working on, right? So now you can go back to the person or the client, the team, whatever, and say, hey, you've asked us to do D, E, and F, X, Y, Z, these other things that we've not been contracted to do. We've already been working on hourly rate on this thing. Well, we can do these other things hourly rate. Is that okay with you? You can say it something like that. Or if you're not working hourly rate, you're working on a contract project, well, on a one-time fee type project, then you can say, hey, you've asked us to do these things that are a bit out of scope. We've been contracted to dig holes, but now you're asking us to lay pipe. We've been contracted to do the copywriting, but now you're asking us to do video. This is a little bit out of the wheelhouse of this project. Let's discuss working on these additional items later, or if you need them now, we can, but it's going to cost you extra. Let's discuss how this is going to work. Now, you don't always have to have these scope creep provisions in there, though you should, and you really should cover your butt. But if you don't, you have the scope document. If you don't have a scope document, you've kind of really screwed yourself over there. So if you have the scope document, refer to the scope document and refer to that as the real main selling piece of, hey, we're doing X. We're not going to be doing these other things unless we're getting something out of it too. Again, if it's a small thing, I'd say why not? Give it a little bit, right? Build that relationship. But if it's a big thing or a medium-sized thing, or you don't really like that person, then hey, everything is going to be billed accordingly because that's what the contract says. The contract says, we're only doing ABC. And that's how it should be. So what do you say to these people? A few things you can say. Hey, I noticed you're asking us a few of these things that are a little bit out of scope. Why don't we sit down and discuss these things that might be a little bit extra, or if we can refer you to some other professionals who can help you with these things. You might be the web developer and they're asking you to design. You can say, hey, this is cool. I can kind of work on design, but it's not what you hired me for, and I can complete this code that you've asked me to, and on time still. But I can refer you to a really good web designer or the creative person who can read these infographics for you. I can refer you to them. Do you want me to connect you? You can do something like that. And that's what you really should do. Either outsource it, or if they want to start really keep working with you, then say, well, great, we can do these things. Well, let's finish this first project, and then we can talk about, phase 2. And that's what I honestly usually do. Hey, we've talked about A, B, and C that we're going to be doing. Let's do items 4, 5, and 6 later. It's called a phase 2, part 2, whatever you want to call it, milestone 2. I give them a few words that they might pick up on and see what sticks with them. Phases usually seem to work really nicely. So we tell them, hey, let's put into phase 2. But if they really, really need it now, then I say, great. I know that you really want it now. Let's do this at the hourly rate because it's not too big, but it's going to cost you a little bit extra because it's not within the scope of work that you've hired us to do. And that's honestly, that handles pretty much 99% of the things. The conversation of, hey, it's not in scope. I can refer you out to somebody who is an expert at doing this new thing you've asked us to do. Or you've asked us to do the same thing we're currently doing, but more of it. Great, we can extend the contract. We can do it at an hourly rate, or we can talk about it on a mini project or a phase 2 type thing after we get it right now. And that's how we've handled, honestly, 99% of the issues we've had. There are people who really push back on this thing. Hey, well, you really should be doing these things. I'm sorry, but you're asking us to do additional work. And if you're asking us to do additional work, we should be compensated fairly for these things. If somebody really, really pushes back on them, they're kind of weird. And we, so far, I guess, thankfully, we've not had somebody be that strange. But should that happen, then say, okay, well, we can't do that. We're going to complete this project as is. And then if you want to do more, we'll do more later. The thing is, you got to stick your ground. So if somebody is trying to do scope creep, maybe allow a little bit, charge them hourly rate, or do another project, push it to phase 2, whatever it might be, do that. And if they're really still pushing back, then stick your ground. You've been hired to do X, you're doing X. For the rest of it, that's on them, right? I know that doesn't potentially sound good, but you got to live your life and protect your own assets and protect your sanity. So do what you can do and what you've been hired to do. Everything else is extra in some way, shape, or form. And that's it for today's Morning for Visionaries. Make sure to prevent scope creep. Always, always, always have something in your contract to prevent it, or if should it happen, how are you going to handle it? If you don't have it in your contract, you really should, and get it in there in future contracts. Tell them it's going to be handled in phase 2 in another project or hourly rate, or you're going to tell them to go look elsewhere because you're doing X, not D, E, and F. That's it for today's Morning for Visionaries. If you have any suggestions, comments, or want to discuss scope creep, let me know in the comments. I always love listening to what other people do about such things. Thanks. Bye.